This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 21. Louise de Chaulieu to Renee de Lestrade. June. Dear wedded sweetheart, your letter has arrived at the very moment to hearten me for a bold step which I have been meditating night and day. I feel within me a strange craving for the unknown, or, if you will, the forbidden, which makes me uneasy and reveals a conflict in progress in my soul between the laws of society and of nature. I cannot tell whether nature in me is the stronger of the two, but I surprise myself in the act of meditating between the hostile powers. In plain words, what I wanted was to speak with Philippe, alone, at night, under the lime trees at the bottom of our garden. There is no denying that this desire beseems the girl who has earned the epithet of an up-to-date young lady, bestowed on me by the Duchess in jest, and which my father has approved. Yet to me there seems a method in this madness. I should recompense Philippe for the long nights he has passed under my window, at the same time that I should test him, by seeing what he thinks of my escapade and how he comports himself at a critical moment. Let him cast a halo round my folly, behold in him my husband. Let him show one iota less of the tremulous respect with which he bows to me in the Champs-Élysées. Farewell, Don Philippe. As for society, I run less risk in meeting my lover thus than when I smile to him in the drawing-rooms of Madame de Maufrigneuse and the old Marquise de Beauseant, where spies now surround us on every side, and heaven only knows how people stare at the girl suspected of a weakness for a grotesque like Macumer. I cannot tell you to what a state of agitation I am reduced by dreaming of this idea, and the time I have given to planning its execution. I wanted you badly. What happy hours we should have chattered away, lost in the mazes of uncertainty, enjoying in anticipation all the delights and horrors of a first meeting in the silence of night, under the noble lime trees of the Chaulieu mansion, with the moonlight dancing through the leaves. As I sat alone, every nerve tingling, I cried, "Oh, Renee, where are you?" Then your letter came, like a match to gunpowder, and my last scruples went by the board. Through the window I tossed to my bewildered adorer an exact tracing of the key of the little gate at the end of the garden, together with this note: "Your madness must really be put a stop to. If you broke your neck, you would ruin the reputation of the woman you profess to love. Are you worthy of a new proof of regard, and do you deserve that I should talk with you under the limes at the foot of the garden, at the hour when the moon throws them into shadow?" Yesterday at 1 o'clock, when Griffith was going to bed, I said to her, "Take your shawl, dear, and come out with me. I want to go to the bottom of the garden, without anyone knowing." Without a word she followed me. Oh, my Renee, what an awful moment when, after a little pause, full of delicious thrills of agony, I saw him gliding along like a shadow. When he had reached the garden safely, I said to Griffith, "Don't be astonished, but the Baron de Macumer is here, and, indeed, it is on that account I brought you with me." No reply from Griffith. "What would you have with me?" said Philippe, in a tone of such agitation that it was easy to see he was driven beside himself by the noise, slight as it was, of our dresses in the silence of the night, and of our steps upon the gravel. "I want to say to you what I could not write," I replied. Griffith withdrew a few steps. It was one of those mild nights, when the air is heavy with the scent of flowers. My head swam with the intoxicating delight of finding myself all but alone with him in the friendly shade of the lime trees, beyond which lay the garden, shining all the more brightly because the white façade of the house reflected the moonlight. The contrast seemed, as it were, an emblem of our clandestine love leading up to the glaring publicity of a wedding. Neither of us could do more at first than drink in silently the ecstasy of a moment, as new and marvellous for him as for me. At last I found tongue to say, pointing to the elm tree: "Although I am not afraid of scandal, you shall not climb that tree again. We have long enough played schoolboy and schoolgirl. Let us rise now to the height of our destiny. Had that fall killed you, I should have died disgraced." I looked at him. Every scrap of color had left his face. "And if you had been found there, suspicion would have attached either to my mother or to me." "Forgive me," he murmured. "If you walk along the boulevard, I shall hear your step, and when I want to see you I will open my window. But I would not run such a risk unless some emergency arose. Why have you forced me by your rash act to commit another, and one which may lower me in your eyes?" The tears which I saw in his eyes were to me the most eloquent of answers. "What I have done to-night," I went on with a smile, "must seem to you the height of madness." After we had walked up and down in silence more than once, he recovered composure enough to say: "You must think me a fool, and, indeed, the delirium of my joy has robbed me of both nerve and wits. But of this at least be assured, whatever you do is sacred in my eyes from the very fact that it seemed right to you. I honor you as I honor only God besides. And then Miss Griffith is here." "She is here for the sake of the others, not for us," I put in hastily. My dear, he understood me at once. "I know very well," he said, with the humblest glance at me, "that whether she is there or not makes no difference. Unseen of men, we are still in the presence of God, and our own esteem is not less important to us than that of the world." "Thank you, Philippe," I said, holding out my hand to him with a gesture which you ought to see. "A woman, and I am nothing if not a woman, is on the road to loving the man who understands her. Oh, only on the road," I went on, with a finger on my lips. "Don't let your hopes carry you beyond what I say. My heart will belong only to the man who can read it and know its every turn. Our views, without being absolutely identical, must be the same in their breadth and elevation. I have no wish to exaggerate my own merits. Doubtless, what seem virtues in my eyes have their corresponding defects. All I can say is, I should be heartbroken without them." "Having first accepted me as your servant, you now permit me to love you," he said, trembling and looking in my face at each word. "My first prayer has been more than answered." "But," I hastened to reply, "your position seems to me a better one than mine. I should not object to change places, and this change it lies with you to bring about." "In my turn, I thank you," he replied. "I know the duties of a faithful lover. It is mine to prove that I am worthy of you. The trials shall be as long as you choose to make them. If I belie your hopes, you have only God, that I should say it to reject me." "I know that you love me," I replied. "So far," with a cruel emphasis on the words, "you stand first in my regard. Otherwise you would not be here." Then we began to walk up and down as we talked, and I must say that so soon as my Spaniard had recovered himself, he put forth the genuine eloquence of the heart. It was not passion it breathed, but a marvelous tenderness of feeling which he beautifully compared to the divine love. His thrilling voice, which lent an added charm to thoughts, in themselves so exquisite, reminded me of the nightingale's note. He spoke low, using only the middle tones of a fine instrument, and words flowed upon words with the rush of a torrent. It was the overflow of the heart. "No more," I said, "or I shall not be able to tear myself away." And with a gesture I dismissed him. "You have committed yourself now, mademoiselle," said Griffith. "In England that might be so, but not in France," I replied with nonchalance. "I intend to make a love match, and am feeling my way, that is all. You see, dear, as love did not come to me, I had to do as Mahomet did with the mountain." Friday. Once more I have seen my slave. He has become very timid, and puts on an air of pious devotion, which I like, for it seems to say that he feels my power and fascination in every fibre. But nothing in his look or manner can rouse in these society sibyls any suspicion of the boundless love which I see. Don't suppose, though, dear, that I am carried away, mastered, tamed. On the contrary, the taming, mastering, and carrying away are on my side. In short, I am quite capable of reason. Oh, to feel again the terror of that fascination in which I was held by the schoolmaster, the plebeian, the man I kept at a distance. The fact is that love is of two kinds, one which commands, and one which obeys. The two are quite distinct, and the passion to which the one gives rise is not the passion of the other. To get her full of life, perhaps a woman ought to have experience of both. Can the two passions ever coexist? Can the man in whom we inspire love inspire it in us? Will the day ever come when Philippe is my master? Shall I tremble then, as he does now? These are questions which make me shudder. He is very blind. In his place I should have thought Mademoiselle de Chaulieu, meeting me under the limes, a cold, calculating coquette, with starched manners. No, that is not love, it is playing with fire. I am still fond of Philippe, but I am calm and at my ease with him now. No more obstacles. What a terrible thought! It is all ebb tide within, and I fear to question my heart. His mistake was in concealing the ardor of his love. He ought to have forced my self-control. In a word, I was naughty, and I have not got the reward such naughtiness brings. No, dear. However sweet the memory of that half-hour beneath the trees, it is nothing like the excitement of the old time with its "Shall I go? Shall I not go? Shall I write to him? Shall I not write?" Is it thus with all our pleasures? Is suspense always better than enjoyment? Hope than fruition? Is it the rich who in very truth are the poor? Have we not both perhaps exaggerated feeling by giving to imagination too free a rein? There are times when this thought freezes me. Shall I tell you why? Because I am meditating another visit to the bottom of the garden, without Griffith. How far could I go in this direction? Imagination knows no limit, but it is not so with pleasure. Tell me, dear befurbelowed professor, how can one reconcile the two goals of a woman's existence? End of letter 21. Read by Kara Shallenberg on May 4th, 2007, in Oceanside, California. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 22. Louise to Philippe. I am not pleased with you. If you did not cry over Racine's Berenice, and feel it to be the most terrible of tragedies, there is no kinship in our souls. We shall never get on together, and had better break off at once. Let us meet no more. Forget me, for if I do not have a satisfactory reply, I shall forget you. You will become Monsieur le Baron de Maucombe for me, or rather you will cease to be at all. Yesterday at Madame d'Espard's you had a self-satisfied air which disgusted me. No doubt, apparently, about your conquest. In sober earnest, your self-possession alarms me. Not a trace in you of the humble slave of your first letter. Far from betraying the absent-mindedness of a lover, you polished epigrams. This is not the attitude of a true believer, always prostrate before his divinity. If you do not feel me to be the very breath of your life, a being nobler than other women, and to be judged by other standards, then I must be less than a woman in your sight. You have roused in me a spirit of mistrust, Philippe, and its angry mutterings have drowned the accents of tenderness. When I look back upon what has passed between us, I feel in truth that I have a right to be suspicious. For know, Prime Minister of all the Spains, that I have reflected much on the defenceless condition of our sex. My innocence has held a torch, and my fingers are not burnt. Let me repeat to you, then, what my youthful experience taught me. In all other matters, duplicity, faithlessness, and broken pledges are brought to book and punished, but not so with love, which is at once the victim, the accuser, the counsel, judge, and executioner. The cruelest treachery, the most heartless crimes, are those which remain forever concealed, with two hearts alone for witness. How indeed should the victim proclaim them without injury to herself? Love, therefore, has its own code, its own penal system, with which the world has no concern. Now, for my part, I have resolved never to pardon a serious misdemeanor, and in love, pray, what is not serious? Yesterday you had all the air of a man successful in his suit. You would be wrong to doubt it, and yet, if this assurance robbed you of the charming simplicity which sprang from uncertainty, I should blame you severely. I would have you neither bashful nor self-complacent. I would not have you in terror of losing my affection. That would be an insult. But neither would I have you wear your love lightly as a thing of course. Never should your heart be freer than mine. If you know nothing of the torture that a single stab of doubt brings to the soul, tremble lest I give you a lesson. In a single glance I confided my heart to you, and you read the meaning. The purest feelings that ever took root in a young girl's breast are yours. The thought and meditation of which I have told you served only to enrich the mind, but if ever the wounded heart turns to the brain for counsel, be sure the young girl would show some kinship with the demon of knowledge and of daring. I swear to you, Philippe, if you love me, as I believe you do, and if I have reason to suspect the least falling off in the fear, obedience, and respect which you have hitherto professed, if the pure flame of passion which first kindled the fire of my heart should seem to me any day to burn less vividly, you need fear no reproaches. I would not weary you with letters bearing any trace of weakness, pride, or anger, nor even with one of warning like this. But if I spoke no words, Philippe, my face would tell you that death was near. And yet I should not die till I had branded you with my infamy, and sown eternal sorrow in your heart. You would see the girl you loved dishonored and lost in this world, and know her doomed to everlasting suffering in the next. Do not, therefore, I implore you, give me cause to envy the old happy Louise, the object of your pure worship, whose heart expanded in the sunshine of happiness, since, in the words of Dante, she possessed senza brama, sicura ricchezza. I have searched the inferno through to find the most terrible punishment, some torture of the mind to which I might link the vengeance of God. Yesterday, as I watched you, doubt went through me like a sharp, cold dagger's point. Do you know what that means? I mistrusted you, and the pang was so terrible I could not endure it longer. If my service be too hard, leave it, I would not keep you. Do I need any proof of your cleverness? Keep for me the flowers of your wit. Show to others no fine surface to call forth flattery, compliments, or praise. Come to me laden with hatred or scorn, the butt of your calumny. Come to me with the news that women flout you and ignore you, and not one loves you. Then, then you will know the treasures of Louise's heart and love. We are only rich when our wealth is buried so deep that all the world might trample it underfoot, unknowing. If you were handsome, I don't suppose I should have looked at you twice, or discovered one of the 1,000 reasons out of which my love sprang. True, we know no more of these reasons than we know why it is the sun makes the flowers to bloom and ripens the fruit. Yet I could tell you of one reason very dear to me. The character, expression, and individuality that ennoble your face are a sealed book to all but me. Mine is the power which transforms you into the most lovable of men, and that is why I would keep your mental gifts also for myself. To others they should be as meaningless as your eyes, the charm of your mouth and features. Let it be mine alone to kindle the beacon of your intelligence, as I bring the love-light into your eyes. I would have you the Spanish grandee of old days, cold, ungracious, haughty, a monument to be gazed at from afar, like the ruins of some barbaric power, which no one ventures to explore. Now you have nothing better to do than to open up pleasant promenades for the public, and show yourself of a Parisian affability. Is my ideal portrait, then, forgotten? Your excessive cheerfulness was redolent of your love. Had it not been for a restraining glance from me, you would have proclaimed to the most sharp-sighted, keen-witted, and unsparing of Paris salons that your inspiration was drawn from Armande Louise Marie de Chaulieu. I believe in your greatness too much to think for a moment that your love is ruled by policy. But if you did not show a childlike simplicity when with me, I could only pity you. Spite of this first fault, you are still deeply admired by Louise de Chaulieu. End of letter 22. Read by Kara Shallenberg on May 4th, 2007 in Oceanside, California.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to find out how to volunteer, please contact LibriVox.org. Recording by Peter Yearsley. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 23. Felipe to Louise. When God beholds our faults, he sees also our repentance. Yes, my beloved mistress, you are right. I felt that I had displeased you, but knew not how. Now that you have explained the cause of your trouble, I find in it fresh motive to adore you. Like the God of Israel, you are a jealous deity, and I rejoice to see it. For what is holier and more precious than jealousy? My fair guardian angel, jealousy is an ever-wakeful sentinel. It is to love what pain is to the body, the faithful herald of evil. Be jealous of your servant, Louise, I beg of you. The harder you strike, the more contrite will he be, and kiss the rod in all submission, which proves that he is not indifferent to you. But alas, dear, if the pains it cost me to vanquish my timidity and master feelings you thought so feeble were invisible to you, will heaven, think you, reward them? I assure you, it needed no slight effort to show myself to you as I was in the days before I loved. At Madrid I was considered a good talker, and I wanted you to see for yourself the few gifts I may possess. If this were vanity, it has been well punished. Your last glance utterly unnerved me. Never had I so quailed, even when the army of France was at the gates of Cadiz, and I read peril for my life in the dissembling words of my royal master. Vainly I tried to discover the cause of your displeasure, and the lack of sympathy between us which this fact disclosed was terrible to me. For in truth I have no wish but to act by your will, think your thoughts, see with your eyes, respond to your joy and suffering, as my body responds to heat and cold. The crime and the anguish lay for me in the breach of unison in that common life of feeling which you have made so fair. I have vexed her, I exclaimed over and over again, like one distraught. My noble, my beautiful Louise, if anything could increase the fervour of my devotion, or confirm my belief in your delicate moral intuitions, it would be the new light which your words have thrown upon my own feelings. Much in them, of which my mind was formerly but dimly conscious, you have now made clear. If this be designed as chastisement, what can be the sweetness of your rewards? Louise, for me it was happiness enough to be accepted as your servant. You have given me the life of which I despaired. No longer do I draw a useless breath. I have something to spend myself for. My force has an outlet, if only in suffering for you. Once more I say, as I have said before, that you will never find me other than I was when first I offered myself as your lowly bondman. Yes, were you dishonoured and lost, to use your own words, my heart would only cling the more closely to you for your self-sought misery. It would be my care to staunch your wounds, and my prayers should importune God with the story of your innocence and your wrongs. Did I not tell you that the feelings of my heart for you are not a lover's only, that I will be to you father, mother, sister, brother, ay, a whole family, anything or nothing, as you may decree? And is it not your own wish, which has confirmed within the compass of a lover's feeling so many varying forms of devotion? Pardon me, then, if at times the father and brother disappear behind the lover, since you know they are none the less there, though screened from view. Would that you could read the feelings of my heart when you appear before me, radiant in your beauty, the centre of admiring eyes, reclining calmly in your carriage in the Champs-Élysées, or seated in your box at the opera. Then would you know how absolutely free from selfish taint is the pride with which I hear the praises of your loveliness and grace, praises which warm my heart even to the strangers who utter them. When by chance you have raised me to Elysium by a friendly greeting, my pride is mingled with humility, and I depart as though God's blessing rested on me. Nor does the joy vanish without leaving a long track of light behind. It breaks on me through the clouds of my cigarette smoke. More than ever do I feel how every drop of this surging blood throbs for you. Can you be ignorant how you are loved? After seeing you, I return to my study, and the glitter of its Saracenic ornaments sinks to nothing before the brightness of your portrait, when I open the spring that keeps it locked up from every eye, and lose myself in endless musings, or link my happiness to verse. From the heights of heaven I look down upon the course of a life such as my hopes dare to picture it. Have you never in the silence of the night, or through the roar of the town, heard the whisper of a voice in your sweet, dainty ear? Does no one of the 1,000 prayers that I speed to you reach home? By dint of silent contemplation of your pictured face, I have succeeded in deciphering the expression of every feature, and tracing its connection with some grace of the spirit, and then I pen a sonnet to you in Spanish on the harmony of the twofold beauty in which nature has clothed you. These sonnets you will never see, for my poetry is too unworthy of its theme. I dare not send it to you. Not a moment passes without thoughts of you, for my whole being is bound up in you, and if you ceased to be its animating principle, every part would ache. Now, Louise, can you realize the torture to me of knowing that I had displeased you, while entirely ignorant of the cause? The ideal double life which seemed so fair was cut short. My heart turned to ice within me, as hopeless of any other explanation. I concluded that you had ceased to love me. With heavy heart, and yet not wholly without comfort, I was falling back upon my old post as a servant. Then your letter came, and turned all to joy. Oh, might I but listen for ever to such chiding! Once a child, picking himself up from a tumble, turned to his mother with the words, "Forgive me." Hiding his own hurt, he sought pardon for the pain he had caused her. Louise, I was that child, and such as I was then, I am now. Here is the key to my character, which your slave, in all humility, places in your hands. But do not fear, there will be no more stumbling. Keep tight the chain which binds me to you, so that a touch may communicate your lightest wish to him who will ever remain your slave, Felipe. End of letter 23.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 24. Louise de Chaulieu to Renee de Lestrade. October. My dear friend, how is it possible that you, who brought yourself in 2 months to marry a broken-down invalid in order to mother him, should know anything of that terrible shifting drama enacted in the recesses of the heart which we call love, a drama where death lies in a glance or a light reply? I had reserved for Philippe one last supreme test, which was to be decisive. I wanted to know whether his love was the love of a royalist for his king who can do no wrong. Why should the loyalty of a Catholic be less supreme? He walked with me a whole night under the limes at the bottom of the garden, and not a shadow of suspicion crossed his soul. Next day he loved me better, but the feeling was as reverent, as humble, as regretful as ever. He had not presumed an iota. Oh, he is a very Spaniard, a very Abencerrage. He scaled my wall to come and kiss the hand which in the darkness I reached down to him from my balcony. He might have broken his neck. How many of our young men would do the like? But all this is nothing. Christians suffer the horrible pangs of martyrdom in the hope of heaven. The day before yesterday I took aside the royal ambassador to be at the court of Spain, my much-respected father, and said to him with a smile, "Sir, some of your friends will have it that you are marrying your dear Armand to the nephew of an ambassador who has been very anxious for this connection, and has long begged for it. Also, that the marriage contract arranges for his nephew to succeed on his death to his enormous fortune and his title, and bestows on the young couple, in the meantime, an income of 100,000 livres, on the bride a dowry of 800,000 francs. Your daughter weeps, but bows to the unquestioned authority of her honored parent. Some people are unkind enough to say that, behind her tears, she conceals a worldly and ambitious soul. Now we are going to the gentleman's box at the opera to-night, and Monsieur le Baron de Maucombe will visit us there." "Maucombe needs a touch of the spur, then," said my father, smiling at me as though I were a female ambassador. "You mistake Clarissa Harlowe for Figaro," I cried, with a glance of scorn and mockery. "When you see me with my right hand ungloved, you will give the lie to this impertinent gossip, and will mark your displeasure at it. I may make my mind easy about your future. You have no more got a girl's headpiece than Jeanne d'Arc had a woman's heart. You will be happy, you will love nobody, and will allow yourself to be loved." This was too much. I burst into laughter. "What is it, little flirt?" he said. "I tremble for my country's interests." And seeing him look quite blank, I added, "At Madrid." "You have no idea how this little nun has learned, in a year's time, to make fun of her father," he said to the Duchess. "Armand makes light of everything," my mother replied, looking me in the face. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Why, you are not even afraid of rheumatism on these damp nights," she said, with another meaning glance at me. "Oh," I answered, "the mornings are so hot." The Duchess looked down. "It's high time she were married," said my father, "and it had better be before I go." "If you wish it," I replied demurely. 2 hours later, my mother and I, the Duchesse de Maufrigneuse and Madame d'Espard, were all four blooming like roses in the front of the box. I had seated myself sideways, giving only a shoulder to the house, so that I could see everything, myself unseen, in that spacious box which fills one of the 2 angles at the back of the hall, between the columns. Maucombe came, stood up, and put his opera glasses before his eyes, so that he might be able to look at me comfortably. In the first interval entered the young man whom I call King of the Profligates. The Comte Henri de Marseille, who has great beauty of an effeminate kind, entered the box with an epigram in his eyes, a smile upon his lips, and an air of satisfaction over his whole countenance. He first greeted my mother, Madame d'Espard, and the Duchesse de Maufrigneuse, the Comte d'Esgrignon, and Monsieur de Canalis. Then, turning to me, he said, "I do not know whether I shall be the first to congratulate you on an event which will make you the object of envy to many." "Ah, a marriage!" I cried. "Is it left for me, a girl fresh from the convent, to tell you that predicted marriages never come off?" Monsieur de Marsay bent down, whispering to Macumer, and I was convinced, from the movement of his lips, that what he said was this: "Baron, you are perhaps in love with that little coquette, who has used you for her own ends, but as the question is one not of love but of marriage, it is as well for you to know what is going on." Macumer treated this officious scandal-monger to one of those glances of his which seemed to me so eloquent of noble scorn, and replied to the effect that he was "not in love with any little coquette." His whole bearing so delighted me, that directly I caught sight of my father, the glove was off. Philippe had not a shadow of fear or doubt. How well did he bear out my expectations! His faith is only in me, society cannot hurt him with its lies. Not a muscle of the Arab's face stirred, not a drop of the blue blood flushed his olive cheek. The two young counts went out, and I said, laughing, to Macumer, "Monsieur de Marsay has been treating you to an epigram on me." "He did more," he replied. "It was an epithalamium." "You speak Greek to me," I said, rewarding him with a smile and a certain look which always embarrasses him. My father, meantime, was talking to Madame de Maufrigneuse. "I should think so!" he exclaimed. "The gossip which gets about is scandalous. No sooner has a girl come out than every one is keen to marry her, and the ridiculous stories that are invented! I shall never force Armande to marry against her will. I am going to take a turn in the promenade, otherwise people will be saying that I allowed the rumour to spread in order to suggest the marriage to the ambassador, and Caesar's daughter ought to be above suspicion, even more than his wife, if that were possible." The Duchesse de Maufrigneuse and Madame d'Espard shot glances first at my mother, then at the Baron, brimming over with sly intelligence and repressed curiosity. With their serpent's cunning they had at last got an inkling of something going on. Of all mysteries in life, love is the least mysterious. It exhales from women, I believe, like a perfume, and she who can conceal it is a very monster. Our eyes prattle even more than our tongues. Having enjoyed the delightful sensation of finding Philippe rise to the occasion as I had wished, it was only in nature I should hunger for more. So I made the signal agreed on for telling him that he might come to my window by the dangerous road you know of. A few hours later I found him, upright as a statue, glued to the wall, his hand resting on the balcony of my window, studying the reflections of the light in my room. "My dear Philippe," I said, "you have acquitted yourself well tonight. You behaved exactly as I should have done had I been told that you were on the point of marrying." "I thought," he replied, "that you would hardly have told others before me." "And what right have you to this privilege?" "The right of one who is your devoted slave." "In very truth?" "I am, and shall ever remain so." "But suppose this marriage was inevitable? Suppose that I had agreed?" Two flashing glances lit up the moonlight, one directed to me, the other to the precipice which the wall made for us. He seemed to calculate whether a fall together would mean death, but the thought merely passed like lightning over his face and sparkled in his eyes. A power stronger than passion checked the impulse. "An Arab cannot take back his word," he said in a husky voice. "I am your slave to do with as you will. My life is not mine to destroy. The hand on the balcony seemed as though its hold were relaxing. I placed mine on it as I said, "Philippe, my beloved, from this moment I am your wife in thought and will. Go in the morning to ask my father for my hand. He wishes to retain my fortune, but if you promise to acknowledge receipt of it in the contract, his consent will no doubt be given. I am no longer Armand de Chaulieu. Leave me at once. No breath of scandal must touch Louise de Maucombe." He listened with blanched face and trembling limbs, then, like a flash, had cleared the 10 feet to the ground in safety. It was a moment of agony, but he waved his hand to me and disappeared. "I am loved, then," I said to myself, "as never woman was before," and I fell asleep in the calm content of a child, my destiny for ever fixed. About 2 o'clock next day my father summoned me to his private room, where I found the Duchess and Maucombe. There was an interchange of civilities. I replied quite simply that if my father and M. Henarez were of one mind, I had no reason to oppose their wishes. Thereupon my mother invited the Baron to dinner, and after dinner we all four went for a drive in the Bois de Boulogne, where I had the pleasure of smiling ironically to M. de Marsay as he passed on horseback, and caught sight of Maucombe sitting opposite to us beside my father. My bewitching Philippe has had his cards reprinted as follows: Henarez, Baron de Maucombe, formerly Duc de Soria. Every morning he brings me with his own hands a splendid bouquet, hidden in which I never fail to find a letter containing a Spanish sonnet in my honor, which he has composed during the night. Not to make this letter inordinately large, I send you as specimens only the first and last of these sonnets, which I have translated for your benefit, word for word and line for line. First Sonnet. Many a time I've stood, clad in thin silken vest, drawn sword in hand, with steady pulse, waiting the charge of a raging bull, and the thrust of his horn sharper pointed than Phoebe's crescent. I've scaled, on my lips the lilt of an Andalusian dance, the steep redoubt under a rain of fire. I've staked my life upon a hazard of the dice, careless as though it were a gold doubloon. My hand would seek the ball out of the cannon's mouth, but now meseems I grow more timid than a crouching hare, or a child spying some ghost in the curtain's folds. For when your sweet eye rests on me, an icy sweat covers my brow, my knees give way, I tremble, shrink, my courage gone. Second Sonnet. Last night I fain would sleep to dream of thee, but jealous sleep fled my eyelids. I sought the balcony and looked towards heaven, always my glance flies upward when I think of thee. Strange sight, whose meaning love alone can tell. The sky had lost its sapphire hue. The stars, dulled diamonds in their golden mount, twinkled no more, nor shed their warmth. The moon, washed of her silver radiance lily white, hung mourning over the gloomy plain, for thou hast robbed the heavens of all that made them bright. The snowy sparkle of the moon is on thy lovely brow. Heaven's azure centres in thine eyes, thy lashes fall like starry rays. What more gracious way of saying to a young girl that she fills your life? Tell me what you think of this love, which expends itself in lavishing the treasures alike of the earth and of the soul. Only within the last 10 days have I grasped the meaning of that Spanish gallantry, so famous in old days. Ah me! Dear, what is going on now at La Crampade? How often do I take a stroll there, inspecting the growth of our crops? Have you no news to give of our mulberry trees, our last winter's plantations? Does everything prosper as you wish? And while the buds are opening on our shrubs, I will not venture to speak of the bedding out plants, have they also blossomed in the bosom of the wife? Does Louis continue his policy of madrigals? Do you enter into each other's thoughts? I wonder whether your little runlet of wedding peace is better than the raging torrent of my love. Has my sweet lady professor taken offence? I cannot believe it, and if it were so, I should send Philippe off at once, post haste, to fling himself at her knees and bring back to me my pardon or her head. Sweet love, my life here is a splendid success, and I want to know how it fares with life in Provence. We have just increased our family by the addition of a Spaniard with the complexion of a Havana cigar, and your congratulations still tarry. Seriously, my sweet Renee, I am anxious. I am afraid lest you should be eating your heart out in silence, for fear of casting a gloom over my sunshine. Write to me at once, naughty child, and tell me your life in its every minutest detail. Tell me whether you still hold back, whether your independence still stands erect, or has fallen on its knees, or is sitting down comfortably, which would indeed be serious. Can you suppose that the incidents of your married life are without interest for me? I muse at times over all that you have said to me. Often when, at the opera, I seem absorbed in watching the pirouetting dancers, I am saying to myself, "It is 9:30. Perhaps she is in bed. What is she about? Is she happy? Is she alone with her independence? Or has her independence gone the way of other dead and cast-off independences?" 1,000 loves. End of Letter 24. Read by Kara Shallenberg on May 5th, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, December 2006. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 25. Renee de l'Estorade to Louise de Chaulieu. Saucy girl! Why should I write? What could I say? Whilst your life is varied by social festivities, as well as by the anguish, the tempers, and the flowers of love, all of which you describe so graphically that I might be watching some first-rate acting at the theatre, mine is as monotonous and regular as though it were passed in a convent. We always go to bed at 9 and get up with daybreak. Our meals are served with a maddening punctuality. Nothing ever happens. I have accustomed myself without much difficulty to this mapping out of the day, which perhaps is, after all, in the nature of things. Where would the life of the universe be but for that subjection to fixed laws which, according to the astronomers, so Louis tells me, rule the spheres? It is not order of which we weary. Then I have laid upon myself certain rules of dress, and these occupy my time in the mornings. I hold it part of my duty as a wife to look as charming as possible. I feel a certain satisfaction in it, and it causes lively pleasure to the good old man and to Louis. After lunch we walk. When the newspapers arrive, I disappear to look after my household affairs, or to read, for I read a great deal, or to write to you. I come back to the others an hour before dinner, and after dinner we play cards, or receive visits, or pay them. Thus my days pass between a contented old man, who has done with passions, and the man who owes his happiness to me. Louis's happiness is so radiant that it has at last warmed my heart. For women, happiness no doubt cannot consist in the mere satisfaction of desire. Sometimes in the evening, when I am not required to take a hand in the game, and can sink back in my armchair, imagination bears me on its strong wings into the very heart of your life. Then its riches, its changeful tints, its surging passions become my own, and I ask myself to what end such a stormy preface can lead. May I not swallow up the book itself? For you, my darling, the illusions of love are possible. For me, only the facts of homely life remain. Yes, your love seems to me a dream. Therefore I find it hard to understand why you are determined to throw so much romance over it. Your ideal man must have more soul than fire, more nobility and self-command than passion. You persist in trying to clothe in living form the dream ideal of a girl on the threshold of life. You demand sacrifices for the pleasure of rewarding them, You submit your Philippe to tests in order to ascertain whether desire, hope, and curiosity are enduring in their nature. But, child, behind all your fantastic stage scenery rises the altar, where everlasting bonds are forged. The very morrow of your marriage, the graceful structure raised by your subtle strategy may fall before that terrible reality which makes of a girl a woman, of a gallant a husband. Remember that there is not exemption for lovers. For them, as for ordinary folk like Louis and me, there lurks beneath the wedding rejoicings the great perhaps of Rabelais. I do not blame you, though of course it was rash for talking with Philippe in the garden, or for spending a night with him, you on your balcony, he on his wall. But you make a plaything of life, and I am afraid that life may some day turn the tables. I dare not give you the counsel which my own experience would suggest. But let me repeat once more from the seclusion of my valley that the viaticum of married life lies in these words: resignation and self-sacrifice. For, spite of all your tests, your coyness, and your vigilance, I can see that marriage will mean to you what it has been to me. The greater the passion, the steeper the precipice we have hewn for our fall. That is the only difference. Oh, what I would give to see the Baron de Macumer and talk with him for an hour or two! Your happiness lies so near my heart. End of letter 25.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 26. Louise de Maucombe to Renee de Lestrade. March. As Philippe has carried out, with a truly Saracenic generosity, the wishes of my father and mother in acknowledging the fortune he has not received from me, the Duchess has become even more friendly to me than before. She calls me "little sly boots," "little woman of the world," and says I know how to use my tongue. "But, dear mamma," I said to her the evening before the contract was signed, "you attribute to cunning and smartness on my part what is really the outcome of the truest, simplest, most unselfish, most devoted love that ever was. I assure you that I am not at all the woman of the world you do me the honor of believing me to be." "Come, come, Armand," she said, putting her arm on my neck and drawing me to her, in order to kiss my forehead. "You did not want to go back to the convent, you did not want to die an old maid, and, like a fine, noble-hearted Chaulieu, as you are, you recognized the necessity of building up your father's family." The Duke was listening. If you knew, Renee, what flattery lies for him in these words. "I have watched you during the whole winter, poking your little nose into all that goes on, forming very sensible opinions about men and the present state of society in France, and you have picked out the one Spaniard capable of giving you the splendid position of a woman who reigns supreme in her own house. My little girl, you treated him exactly as Tullia treats your brother." "What lessons they give in my sister's convent!" exclaimed my father. A glance at my father cut him short at once, then, turning to the Duchess, I said, "Madam, I love my future husband, Philippe de Soria, with all the strength of my soul. Although this love sprang up without my knowledge, and though I fought it stoutly when it first made itself felt, I swear to you that I never gave way to it till I had recognized in the Baron de Maucombe a character worthy of mine, a heart of which the delicacy, the generosity, the devotion, and the temper are suited to my own." "But, my dear," she began, interrupting me, "he is as ugly as—" "As anything you like," I retorted quickly, "but I love his ugliness." "If you love him, Armand," said my father, "and have the strength to master your love, you must not risk your happiness. Now, happiness in marriage depends largely on the first days." "Days only?" interrupted my mother. Then, with a glance at my father, she continued, "You had better leave us, my dear, to have our talk together." "You are to be married, dear child," the Duchess then began, in a low voice, "in 3 days. It becomes my duty, therefore, without silly whimpering, which would be unbefitting our rank in life, to give you the serious advice which every mother owes to her daughter. You are marrying a man whom you love, and there is no reason why I should pity you or myself. I have only known you for a year, and if this period has been long enough for me to learn to love you, it is hardly sufficient to justify floods of tears at the idea of losing you. Your mental gifts are even more remarkable than those of your person. You have gratified maternal pride, and have shown yourself a sweet and loving daughter. I, in my turn, can promise you that you will always find a staunch friend in your mother. You smile? Alas, it too often happens that a mother who has lived on excellent terms with her daughter, as long as the daughter is a mere girl, comes to cross purposes with her when they are both women together. It is your happiness which I want, so listen to my words. The love which you now feel is that of a young girl, and is natural to us all, for it is woman's destiny to cling to a man. Unhappily, pretty one, there is but one man in the world for a woman, and sometimes this man, whom fate has marked out for us, is not the one whom we, mistaking a passing fancy for love, choose as husband. Strange as what I say may appear to you, it is worth noting. If we cannot love the man we have chosen, the fault is not exclusively ours, it lies with both, or sometimes with circumstances over which we have no control. Yet there is no reason why the man chosen for us by our family, the man to whom our fancy has gone out, should not be the man whom we can love. The barriers which arise later between husband and wife are often due to lack of perseverance on both sides. The task of transforming a husband into a lover is not less delicate than that other task of making a husband of the lover, in which you have just proved yourself marvelously successful. I repeat it, your happiness is my object. Never allow yourself, then, to forget that the first 3 months of your married life may work your misery if you do not submit to the yoke with the same forbearance, tenderness, and intelligence that you have shown during the days of courtship. For, my little rogue, you know very well that you have indulged in all the innocent pleasures of a clandestine love affair. If the culmination of your love begins with disappointment, dislike, nay, even with pain, well, come and tell me about it. Don't hope for too much from marriage at first. It will perhaps give you more discomfort than joy. The happiness of your life requires at least as patient cherishing as the early shoots of love. To conclude, if by chance you should lose the lover, you will find in his place the father of your children. In this, my dear child, lies the whole secret of social life. Sacrifice everything to the man whose name you bear, the man whose honor and reputation cannot suffer in the least degree without involving you in frightful consequences. Such sacrifice is thus not only an absolute duty for women of our rank, it is also their wisest policy. This, indeed, is the distinctive mark of great moral principles, that they hold good and are expedient from whatever aspect they are viewed. But I need say no more to you on this point. I fancy you are of a jealous disposition, and, my dear, if you knew how jealous I am! But you must not be stupid over it. To publish your jealousy to the world is like playing at politics with your cards upon the table, and those who let their own game be seen learn nothing of their opponents. Whatever happens, we must know how to suffer in silence. She added that she intended having some plain talk about me with Macumer the evening before the wedding. Raising my mother's beautiful arm, I kissed her hand, and dropped on it a tear, which the tone of real feeling in her voice had brought to my eyes. In the advice she had given me, I read high principle worthy of herself and of me, true wisdom, and a tenderness of heart unspoilt by the narrow code of society. Above all, I saw that she understood my character. These few simple words summed up the lessons which life and experience had brought her, perhaps at a heavy price. She was moved, and said, as she looked at me, "Dear little girl, you've got a nasty crossing before you, and most women, in their ignorance or their disenchantment, are as wise as the Earl of Westmoreland." We both laughed, but I must explain the joke. The evening before, a Russian princess had told us an anecdote of this gentleman. He had suffered frightfully from seasickness in crossing the Channel, and turned tail when he got near Italy, because he had heard someone speak of crossing the Alps. "Thank you, I've had quite enough crossings already," he said. You will understand, Renee, that your gloomy philosophy and my mother's lecture were calculated to revive the fears which used to disturb us at Blois. The nearer marriage approached, the more did I need to summon all my strength, my resolution, and my affection to face this terrible passage from maidenhood to womanhood. All our conversations came back to my mind. I reread your letters and discerned in them a vague undertone of sadness. This anxiety had one advantage at least. It helped me to the regulation expression for a bride as commonly depicted. The consequence was that on the day of signing the contract, everybody said I looked charming, and quite the right thing. This morning at the mairie it was an informal business, and only the witnesses were present. I am writing this tale to my letter while they are putting out my dress for dinner. We shall be married at midnight at the church of Saint Valère, after a very gay evening. I confess that my fears give me a martyr-like and modest air to which I have no right, but which will be admired. Why, I cannot conceive. I am delighted to see that poor Philippe is every whit as timorous as I am. Society grates on him. He is like a bat in a glass shop. "Thank heaven the day won't last forever," he whispered to me in all innocence. In his bashfulness and timidity, he would have liked to have no one there. The Sardinian ambassador, when he came to sign the contract, took me aside in order to present me with a pearl necklace, linked together by 6 splendid diamonds, a gift from my sister-in-law, the Duchesse de Soria. Along with the necklace was a sapphire bracelet, on the underside of which were engraved the words, "Though unknown, beloved." 2 charming letters came with these presents, which, however, I could not accept without consulting Philippe. "For," I said, "I should not like to see you wearing ornaments that came from any one but me." He kissed my hand, quite moved, and replied, "Wear them for the sake of the inscription, and also for the kind feeling which is sincere." Saturday evening. Here, then, my poor Renee, are the last words of your girl-friend. After the midnight mass, we set off for an estate which Philippe, with kind thought for me, has bought in Nivernais, on the way to Provence. Already my name is Louise de Maucombe, but I leave Paris in a few hours as Louise de Chaulieu. However I am called, there will never be for you but one Louise. End of letter 26. Read by Kara Shallenberg on May 6, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
Recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Kara Shallenberg. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 27. The Same to the Same. October. I have not written to you, dear, since our marriage, nearly 8 months ago, and not a line from you. Madame, you are inexcusable. To begin with, we set off in a post-chaise for the castle of Chantepleurs, the property which Macumer has bought in Nivernais. It stands on the banks of the Loire, 60 leagues from Paris. Our servants, with the exception of my maid, were there before us, and we arrived, after a very rapid journey, the next evening. I slept all the way from Paris to beyond Montargis. My lord and master put his arm round me, and pillowed my head on his shoulder, upon an arrangement of handkerchiefs. This was the one liberty he took, and the almost motherly tenderness, which got the better of his drowsiness, touched me strangely. I fell asleep then under the fire of his eyes, and awoke to find them still blazing. The passionate gaze remained unchanged, but what thoughts had come and gone meanwhile? Twice he had kissed me on the forehead. At Briare we had breakfast in the carriage, then followed a talk like our old talks at Blois, while the same Loire we used to admire called forth our praises, and at 7:30 we entered the noble long avenue of lime trees, acacias, sycamores, and larches, which leads to Chantepleurs. At 8 we dined. At 10 we were in our bedroom, a charming Gothic room made comfortable with every modern luxury. Felipe, who is thought so ugly, seemed to me quite beautiful in his graceful kindness, and the exquisite delicacy of his affection. Of passion not a trace. All through the journey he might have been an old friend of 15 years' standing. Later he has described to me, with all the vivid touches of his first letter, the furious storms that raged within, and were not allowed to ruffle the outer surface. "So far I have found nothing very terrible in marriage," I said, as I walked to the window and looked out on the glorious moon which lit up a charming park, breathing of heavy scents. He drew near, put his arm again round me, and said, "Why fear it? Have I ever yet proved false to my promise in gesture or look? Why should I be false in the future?" Yet never were words or glances more full of mastery. His voice thrilled every fibre of my heart and roused a sleeping force. His eyes were like the sun in power. "Oh," I exclaimed, "what a world of Moorish perfidy in this attitude of perpetual prostration!" He understood, my dear. So, my fair sweetheart, if I have let months slip by without writing, you can now divine the cause. I have to recall the girl's strange past in order to explain the woman to myself. Renee, I understand you now. Not to her dearest friend, not to her mother, not, perhaps, even to herself, can a happy bride speak of her happiness. This memory ought to remain absolutely her own, an added rapture, a thing beyond words, too sacred for disclosure. Is it possible that the name of duty has been given to the delicious frenzy of the heart, to the overwhelming rush of passion? And for what purpose? What malevolent power conceived the idea of crushing a woman's sensitive delicacy, and all the thousand wiles of her modesty under the fetters of constraint? What sense of duty can force from her these flowers of the heart, the roses of life, the passionate poetry of her nature, apart from love? To claim feeling as a right, why, it blooms of itself under the sun of love, and shrivels to death under the cold blast of distaste and aversion. Let love guard his own rights. Oh, my noble Renee, I understand you now. I bow to your greatness, amazed at the depth and clearness of your insight. Yes, the woman who has not used the marriage ceremony, as I have done, merely to legalize and publish the secret election of her heart, has nothing left but to fly to motherhood. When earth fails, the soul makes for heaven. One hard truth emerges from all that you have said. Only men who are really great know how to love, and now I understand the reason of this. Man obeys two forces, one sensual, one spiritual. Weak or inferior men mistake the first for the last, whilst great souls know how to clothe the merely natural instinct in all the graces of the spirit. The very strength of this spiritual passion imposes severe self-restraint, and inspires them with reverence for women. Clearly, feeling is sensitive in proportion to the calibre of the mental powers generally, and this is why the man of genius alone has something of a woman's delicacy. He understands and divines woman, and the wings of passion on which he raises her are restrained by the timidity of the sensitive spirit. But when the mind, the heart, and the senses all have their share in the rapture which transports us, then there is no falling to earth, rather it is to heaven we soar, alas, for only too brief a visit. Such, dear soul, is the philosophy of the first 3 months of my married life. Philippe is angelic. Without figure of speech, he is another self, and I can think aloud with him. His greatness of soul passes my comprehension. Possession only attaches him more closely to me, and he discovers in his happiness new motives for loving me. For him I am the nobler part of himself. I can foresee that years of wedded life, far from impairing his affection, will only make it more assured, develop fresh possibilities of enjoyment, and bind us in more perfect sympathy. What a delirium of joy! It is part of my nature that pleasure has an exhilarating effect on me. It leaves sunshine behind and becomes a part of my inner being. The interval which parts one ecstasy from another is like the short night which marks off our long summer days. The sun which flushed the mountain tops with warmth in setting finds them hardly cold when it rises. What happy chance has given me such a destiny? My mother had roused a host of fears in me. Her forecast, which, though free from the alloy of vulgar pettiness, seemed to me redolent of jealousy, has been falsified by the event. Your fears and hers, my own, all have vanished in thin air. We remained at Chantepleurs 7 months and a half, for all the world like a couple of runaway lovers fleeing the parental warmth, while the roses of pleasure crowned our love and embellished our dual solitude. One morning, when I was even happier than usual, I began to muse over my lot, and suddenly Renee and her prosaic marriage flashed into my mind. It seemed to me that now I could grasp the inner meaning in your life. Oh, my sweet, why do we speak a different tongue? Your marriage of convenience and my love match are two worlds, as widely separated as the finite from infinity. You still walk the earth, whilst I range the heavens. Your sphere is human, mine divine. Love crowned me queen, you reign by reason and duty. So lofty are the regions where I soar, that a fall would shiver me to atoms. But no more of this. I shrink from painting to you the rainbow brightness, the profusion, the exuberant joy of love's springtime, as we know it. For 10 days we have been in Paris, staying in a charming house in the Rue du Bac, prepared for us by the architect to whom Philippe entrusted the decoration of Chantepleurs. I have been listening, in all the full content of an assured and sanctioned love, to that divine music of Rossini's, which used to soothe me when, as a restless girl, I hungered vaguely after experience. They say I am more beautiful, and I have a childish pleasure in hearing myself called Madame. Friday morning. Renee, my fair saint, the happiness of my own life pulls me forever back to you. I feel that I can be more to you than ever before, you are so dear to me. I have studied your wedded life closely in the light of my own opening chapters, and you seem to me to come out of the scrutiny so great, so noble, so splendid in your goodness, that I here declare myself your inferior and humble admirer, as well as your friend. When I think what marriage has been to me, it seems to me that I should have died, had it turned out otherwise. And you live. Tell me what your heart feeds on. Never again shall I make fun of you. Mockery, my sweet, is the child of ignorance. We jest at what we know nothing of. Recruits will laugh where the veteran soldier looks grave, was a remark made to me by the Comte de Chaulieu, that poor cavalry officer whose campaigning so far has consisted in marches from Paris to Fontainebleau and back again. I surmise, too, my dear love, that you have not told me all. There are wounds which you have hidden. You suffer, I am convinced of it. In trying to make out at this distance, and from the scraps you tell me, the reasons of your conduct, I have weaved together all sorts of romantic theories about you. She has made a mere experiment in marriage, I thought one evening, and what is happiness for me had proved only suffering to her. Her sacrifice is barren of reward, and she would not make it greater than need be. The unctuous axioms of social morality are only used to cloak her disappointment. Ah, Renee, the best of happiness is that it needs no dogma and no fine words to pave the way. It speaks for itself, while theory has been piled upon theory to justify the system of women's vassalage and thraldom. If self-denial be so noble, so sublime, what, pray, of my joy, sheltered by the gold and white canopy of the church, and witnessed by the hand and seal of the most sour-faced of mayors? Is it a thing out of nature? For the honour of the law, for her own sake, but most of all to make my happiness complete, I long to see my Renee content. Oh, tell me that you see a dawn of love for this Louis who adores you. Tell me that the solemn, symbolic torch of Hymen has not alone served to lighten your darkness, but that love, the glorious sun of our hearts, pours his rays on you. I come back always, you see, to this midday blaze, which will be my destruction, I fear. Dear Renee, do you remember how, in your outbursts of girlish devotion, you would say to me, as we sat under the vine-covered arbor of the convent garden, "I love you so, Louise, that if God appeared to me in a vision, I would pray him that all the sorrows of life might be mine, and all the joy yours. I burn to suffer for you. Now, darling, the day has come when I take up your prayer, imploring heaven to grant you a share in my happiness. I must tell you my idea. I have a shrewd notion that you are hatching ambitious plans under the name of Louis de l'Estrade. Very good. Get him elected deputy at the approaching election, for he will be very nearly 40 then, and as the Chamber does not meet till 6 months later, he will have just attained the age necessary to qualify for a seat. You will come to Paris. There, isn't that enough? My father and the friends I shall have made by that time will learn to know and admire you, and if your father-in-law will agree to found a family, we will get the title of Comte for Louis. That is something at least. And we shall be together. End of letter 27. Read on August 27, 2007, in Oceanside, California.
The LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Michelle Crandall, Fremont, California, December 2006. Letters of Two Brides by Honoré de Balzac. Letter 28. Renee de l'Estrade to Louise de Maucombe. December. My thrice happy Louise, your letter has made me dizzy. For a few moments I held it in my listless hands, while a tear or two sparkled on it in the setting sun. I was alone beneath the small barren rock where I have had a seat placed. Far off, like a lance of steel, the Mediterranean shone. The seat is shaded by aromatic shrubs, and I have had a very large jessamine, some honeysuckle, and Spanish brooms transplanted there, so that some day the rock will be entirely covered with climbing plants. The wild vine has already taken root there. But winter draws near, and all this greenery is faded like a piece of old tapestry. In this spot I am never molested. It is understood that here I wish to be alone. It is named Louise's seat, a proof, is it not, that even in solitude I am not alone here? If I tell you all these details, to you so paltry, and try to describe the vision of green with which my prophetic gaze clothes this bare rock, on which top some freak of nature has set up a magnificent parasol pine, it is because in all this I have found an emblem to which I cling. It was while your blessed lot was filling me with joy, and, must I confess it, with bitter envy too, that I felt the first movement of my child within, and this mystery of physical life reacted upon the inner recesses of my soul. This indefinable sensation, which partakes of the nature at once of a warning, a delight, a pain, a promise, and a fulfillment. This joy, which is mine alone, unshared by mortal, this wonder of wonders, has whispered to me that one day this rock shall be a carpet of flowers, resounding to the merry laughter of children, that I shall at last be blessed among women, and from me shall spring forth fountains of life. Now I know what I have lived for. Thus the first certainty of bearing within me another life brought healing to my wounds. A joy that beggars description has crowned for me those long days of sacrifice in which Louis had already found his. Sacrifice, I said to myself, how far does it excel passion? What pleasure has roots so deep as one which is not personal but creative? Is not the spirit of sacrifice a power mightier than any of its results? Is it not that mysterious, tireless divinity who hides beneath innumerable spheres in an unexplored centre through which all worlds in turn must pass? Sacrifice, solitary and secret, rich in pleasures only tasted in silence, which none can guess at, and no profane eye has ever seen. Sacrifice, jealous god and tyrant, god of strength and victory, exhaustless spring, which, partaking of the very essence of all that exists, can by no expenditure be drained below its own level. Sacrifice, there is the keynote of my life. For you, Louise, love is but the reflex of Philippe's passion. The life which I shed upon my little ones will come back to me in ever-growing fullness. The plenty of your golden harvest will pass. Mine, though late, will be the more enduring, for each hour will see it renewed. Love may be the fairest gem which society has filched from nature, but what is motherhood save nature in her most gladsome mood? A smile has dried my tears. Love makes my Louis happy, but marriage has made me a mother, and who shall say I am not happy also? With slow steps, then, I return to my white grange with the green shutters, to write you these thoughts. So it is, darling, that the most marvellous, and yet the simplest process of nature has been going on in me for 5 months. And yet, in your ear let me whisper it, so far it agitates neither my heart nor my understanding. I see all around me happy. The grandfather-to-be has become a child again, trespassing on the grandchild's place. The father wears a grave and anxious look. They are all most attentive to me. All talk of the joy of being a mother. Alas! I alone remain cold, and I dare not tell you how dead I am to all emotion, though I affect a little in order not to damp the general satisfaction. But with you I may be frank, and I confess that, at my present stage, motherhood is a mere affair of the imagination. Louis was to the full as much surprised as I. Does not this show how little, unless by his impatient wishes, the father counts for in this matter? Chance, my dear, is the sovereign deity in childbearing. My doctor, while maintaining that this chance works in harmony with nature, does not deny that children who are the fruit of passionate love are bound to be richly endowed both physically and mentally, and that often the happiness which shone like a radiant star over their birth seems to watch over them through life. It may be, then, Louise, that motherhood reserves joys for you which I shall never know. It may be that the feeling of a mother for the child of a man whom she adores, as you adore Philippe, is different from that with which she regards the offspring of reason, duty, and desperation. Thoughts such as these, which I bury in my inmost heart, add to the preoccupation only natural to a woman soon to be a mother. And yet, as the family cannot exist without children, I long to speed the moment from which the joys of family, where alone I am to find my life, shall date their beginning. At present I live a life all expectation and mystery, except for a sickening physical discomfort, which no doubt serves to prepare a woman for suffering of a different kind. I watch my symptoms, and in spite of the attentions and thoughtful care with which Louis' anxiety surrounds me, I am conscious of a vague uneasiness, mingled with the nausea, the distaste for food, and abnormal longings common to my condition. If I am to speak candidly, I must confess, at the risk of disgusting you with the whole business, to an incomprehensible craving for rotten fruit. My husband goes to Marseille to fetch the finest oranges the world produces, from Malta, Portugal, Corsica, and these I don't touch. Then I hurry there myself, sometimes on foot, and in a little back street running down to the harbour, close to the town hall, I find wretched, half-putrid oranges, 2 for a sou, which I devour eagerly. The bluish-greenish shades on the mouldy parts sparkle like diamonds in my eyes. They are flowers to me. I forget the putrid odour and find them delicious, with a piquant flavour, and stimulating as wine. My dear, they are the first love of my life. Your passion for Philippe is nothing to this. Sometimes I can slip out secretly and fly to Marseille, full of passionate longings, which grow more intense as I draw near the street. I tremble lest this woman should be sold out of rotten oranges. I pounce on them and then devour them as I stand. It seems to me an ambrosial food, and yet I have seen Louis turn aside, unable to bear the smell. Then came to my mind the ghastly words of Obermann in his gloomy elegy, which I wish I had never read. Roots slake their thirst in the foulest streams. Since I took to this diet, the sickness has ceased, and I feel much stronger. This depravity of taste must have a meaning, for it seems to be part of a natural process, and to be common to most women, sometimes going to most extravagant lengths. When my situation is more marked, I shall not go beyond the grounds, for I should not like to be seen under these circumstances. I have the greatest curiosity to know at what precise moment the sense of motherhood begins. It cannot possibly be in the midst of frightful suffering, the very thought of which makes me shudder. Farewell, favourite of fortune, farewell, my friend, in whom I live again, and through whom I am able to picture to myself this brave love, this jealousy all on fire at a look, these whisperings in the ear, these joys which create for women, as it were, a new atmosphere, a new daylight, fresh life. Ah, pet, I too understand love. Don't weary of telling me everything. Keep faithful to our bond. I promise in my turn to spare you nothing. Nay, to conclude in all seriousness, I will not conceal from you that, on reading your letter a second time, I was seized with a dread which I could not shake off. This superb love seems like a challenge to Providence. Will not the sovereign master of this earth calamity take umbrage if no place be left for him at your feast? What mighty edifice of fortune has he not overthrown? Oh, Louise, forget not in all this happiness your prayers to God. Do good, be kind and merciful. Let your moderation, if it may be, avert disaster. Religion has meant much more to me since I left the convent, and since my marriage, but your Paris news contains no mention of it. In your glorification of Philippe, it seems to me you reverse the saying, and invoke God less than his saint. But, after all, this panic is only excess of affection. You go to church together, I do not doubt, and do good in secret. The close of this letter will seem to you very primitive, I expect, but think of the too eager friendship which prompts these fears, a friendship of the type of La Fontaine's, which takes alarms at dreams, at half-formed, misty ideas. You deserve to be happy, since through it all you still think of me, no less than I think of you, in my monotonous life, which, though it lacks colour, is yet not empty, and, if uneventful, is not unfruitful. God bless you, then. End of letter 28.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org.